My wife said she was going to a karaoke bar with her girlfriends. I knew her best male friend from the bank would be there. I didn't go to crash the party. I just slipped the manager $2,000 to switch their private room security camera feed to the main screen in the lobby. When the image of my wife and that man locked in a passionate kiss flashed across the giant screen, I picked up a microphone. This song is for my wife and the gentleman next to her. I wish you a happy breakup. The moment the waiters kicked down the door to their room, the deafeningly cheerful song drowned out their screams. The next day, the director of her lover's bank called him. "You're fired." The video had already gone viral throughout the entire financial district. That call my wife, Victoria Vaughn, made before she left. The scent of her perfume was so strong I could smell it through the phone. She said it so casually, just going out with Vivian and the girls to the siren's call. "We'll sing for a bit, so I'll be back late, honey." Vivian. I let out a cold laugh in my mind, my nails digging into my palms. Her best male friend, Ethan Montgomery, worked at that damn bank. Victoria mentioned his name more often than she mentioned mine, her actual husband. The siren's call. What a sleazy name. Fine, let them sing. I'd make sure they had a performance they'd never forget. Crashing their party would be too low class. I clutched the $2,000 in fresh bills I'd just withdrawn from the ATM, the smell of ink still on them, and headed straight for the siren's call. The place was a gaudy explosion of gold and glitter, the thumping music hitting my chest like a fist. I immediately spotted him, a tall, thin man in a black suit with a manager name tag, Mr. Walsh. I pulled him into a shadowed corner, my voice lower than the background drumbeat. I slipped the stack of bills into his inner suit pocket with the speed of a magician. His expression was a masterpiece, shifting from shock to confusion, and finally settling on a greasy, all-knowing smirk. He subconsciously patted the pocket. "Hey, pal, do me a favor." I leaned in close, the smell of tobacco and my cheap aftershave hitting him full in the face. "Very important person, room 888. I want that room's camera feed on the main lobby screen. Right now, just for 10 minutes. His Adam's apple bobbed. His eyes darted toward the massive LED screen in the distance, which was currently playing a boring music video of models in bikinis. $2,000 was clearly worth just a little more than his professional ethics. He licked his lips and forced a smile uglier than a grimace. "Buddy, that's a bit risky. Make it another $500 in cash and you've got a deal. It's done." "Get it done for me now," I added, my voice as cold as ice. He hesitated for less than 3 seconds before nodding in resignation. He pulled out his walkie-talkie, turned his back and mumbled into it. "Done." I clapped him on the shoulder, a little harder than necessary, and walked toward a corner of the lobby. My 3 best friends, Barry, Archie, and Lawrence, were already waiting for me at the booth I'd booked. A few token beers sat on the table. Barry shot me a conspiratorial wink, while Archie's face was alight with the thrill of anticipated drama. Lawrence White was the calmest, as always, merely raising his beer glass to me in a silent toast. I slid into the booth, my back ramrod straight, my eyes glued to the giant screen. The scantily clad models were still writhing on screen, the pool water shimmering. Every second that ticked by felt like a dull knife sawing through my flesh. Barry couldn't take it anymore. He leaned in, whispering, sincere, "You sure this is gonna work? Is that son of a bitch really in there?" I didn't answer, just kept staring at the screen, my fingers drumming unconsciously against the cold glass of my beer. My heart hammered against my ribs. Suddenly, the screen went black. A moment later, it flickered to life with a burst of distorted colors and static before snapping into sharp focus. An invisible hand seemed to seize the entire noisy lobby by the throat. The music was still blasting, but the cacophony of human chatter vanished as if sucked away by a receding tide. Hundreds of eyes, shocked, curious, and gleefully expectant, snapped to the giant screen. On it was the scene from Very Important Person Room 888, so clear you could count the sunflower seeds in the fruit platter on the coffee table. Front and center was Victoria, my wife. She was wearing the cream-colored lace dress I'd spent half a month's salary on. Now the collar was wrinkled and askew. She was practically draped over another man, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck like a vine. And that man, Ethan Montgomery, had lost all of his banker boy composure. His meticulously styled hair was a mess, and his glasses were perched crookedly on his nose. One of his hands was wrapped around Victoria's waist, the other pressed against the back of her head. They were stuck together like magnets, their lips crushing against each other with a ferocity that suggested they were about to devour one another. In the background, a few blurry figures, presumably Victoria's so-called best friends, were frozen in place, their expressions blank as if petrified. The table was a disaster of beer cans and fruit peels. The lobby was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, the only sound being the incongruously upbeat background music. The beer bottle in Barry's hand fell with a dull thud onto the thick carpet. His mouth was hanging open wide enough to fit an egg. Archie had dropped a handful of peanuts all over the floor. Lawrence's brow furrowed, his eyes sharp as daggers. Countless gazes shifted from the screen and began to scan the room, quickly zeroing in on our booth. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd. "Holy shit, this is intense. Look, that guy must be the wronged husband, damn. Catching him live like this, that's next level. Who's the woman? She's got a nice figure, but terrible judgment." Those words, those looks, they pricked at me like fiery needles, but I felt no pain. A current of energy shot from the soles of my feet to the top of my head, making my blood boil and my fingertips go numb. All the rage, humiliation, and the searing pain of betrayal were magnified infinitely by that high-definition image, then compressed by the silent, gawking audience into a bomb about to detonate inside my chest. I shot to my feet. The screech of my chair leg scraping against the floor was deafening in the sudden quiet. Every eye in the place swiveled from the screen to me. I stormed to the front desk and snatched the wireless karaoke microphone that controlled the entire club's sound system. A wave of cold determination washed over me. I took a deep breath, and then, with every ounce of strength I had, I unleashed all my humiliation, my fury, and my destructive impulse into the microphone. "Hey!" A massive shriek of feedback tore through the air, making everyone flinch. The club's speakers whined. "Everyone shut the hell up." My voice, amplified to its maximum, exploded through the lobby, drowning out the music and all remaining chatter. The murmuring crowd was instantly silenced. The only sound was my own ragged breathing echoing in the dead quiet. I raised my hand and pointed at the giant screen, my finger trembling with the force of my anger. It was aimed squarely at the two filthy animals still wrapped around each other. "This song," my voice was a blade of tempered steel, cleaving the air, "is dedicated to my wife, Victoria Vaughn, and to the phony gentleman in the suit next to her, Mr. Ethan Montgomery from the bank." I practically spat out the last 4 words through gritted teeth. "I wish you a happy breakup, play it." I roared the last words. Instantly the sound system erupted with the deafeningly cheerful intro to the song. The familiar melody of Happy Breakup, now laced with immense sarcasm and malice, flooded every corner of the lobby. At the exact moment I shouted, 2 waiters stationed near very important person room 888, as if on cue, slammed their feet into the heavy private room door. Bang, with a tremendous crash, the door that symbolized privacy and debauchery was violently, unceremoniously kicked wide open. The scene inside was instantly exposed. The harsh lobby light flooded in, illuminating several terrified pale faces. The deafening strains of Happy Breakup from the lobby, mixed with the clamor of hundreds of spectators, surged through the broken doorway. The sound wave, carrying an icy, mocking chill, crashed over everyone inside the room. Time seemed to freeze. Ethan's expensive navy blue tie, which he'd passionately loosened moments before, now hung crookedly from his neck like a dead snake. His hand was still on Victoria's waist, but his entire body had gone rigid. The color drained from his face, leaving it a deathly white. His eyes, usually so shrewd and sophisticated behind the bank counter, were now wide with disbelief and the sheer terror of being publicly stripped bare. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His glasses were even more askew, his pupils constricting in utter horror. Victoria's state was even more pathetic. She convulsed violently and let out a short, sharp sob, like a chicken being strangled. The flush of passion on her face moments ago had turned to a dead, ashen gray, her lips trembling into an ugly shade of bluish purple. Her arms, which had been wrapped around Ethan's neck, shot back as if electrocuted. She stumbled backward, her high heel twisting, and collapsed in a heap onto the sofa littered with beer cans and fruit peels. She looked up, her terrified gaze flying past the open door to the giant screen in the lobby. It was frozen on the grotesque image of her and Ethan's passionate kiss, and now her own pathetic, crumpled form on the sofa. Victoria finally let out a piercing, off-key scream. She slapped her hands over her face, curled into a ball, and began to tremble uncontrollably. The expressions on the faces of her three best friends were a chaotic mess. The woman in the red dress, Vivian, had her mouth hanging open so wide you could fit a light bulb in it, her eyes bulging. The blonde, Daisy, dropped her microphone with a thud onto a bag of chips. The short-haired woman, Chloe, was simply frozen, a half-eaten slice of watermelon still in her hand, the juice dripping down her sequin dress onto the floor. The three of them stared like startled rabbits, their panicked eyes darting between the menacing waiters at the door, the dark sea of onlookers outside, the disgusting scene on the giant screen, and the collapsing forms of Victoria and the petrified Ethan on the sofa. They were paralyzed by pure, unadulterated fear, having forgotten even how to scream. I let out a sneer. Standing in the center of the roaring lobby, I watched the pale, terrified, and broken faces in that room, especially Victoria's world-shattering collapse and Ethan's banker boy facade being publicly flayed from his bones. An indescribable feeling of exhilaration, like molten lava, burst through the dams of my rage and surged through my entire body. Vindication. This felt so damn good it sent shivers down to my very bones. It was more refreshing than chugging an ice-cold beer on a sweltering day, more liberating than a decade of suppressed anger finally unleashed. The respectable images they had so carefully maintained, the stolen pleasures they enjoyed behind my back, I had personally torn it all to shreds in this single moment, exposing them to hundreds of staring eyes, grinding them to dust under the deafening sound of this blessing. Sincere, you're a goddamn badass. Barry was the first to roar, his face beet red. He slammed his hand on the table, making the beer bottles rattle. He waved his thick arms, spittle flying. That's how you do it, fucking destroy that cheating couple. Archie didn't say anything, but his usually playful face was flushed with excitement. He stared intently at the private room, his eyes shining dangerously. He picked up a full glass of beer and downed it in one go, his Adam's apple bobbing furiously, as if trying to quench a burning fire within him, or perhaps just cheering on the spectacle. Lawrence remained the calmest. A cold, knife-like smile touched his lips. He slowly pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and silently aimed the camera at the gaping doorway of very important person room 888, precisely capturing every wretched moment inside. His fingers tapped on the screen he was clearly recording. The crowd's mood was now fully ignited. Happy breakup. Wish you happiness, you can find someone better. Sounded belting out, following the melody from the speakers. The singing was off-key but filled with malicious glee. Go on, keep kissing, why'd you stop? Hey, isn't that Mr. Montgomery from the bank? Look at him, always acts so high and mighty, but he's a real freak. What's that woman crying about? She seemed to be having a great time a minute ago. Get a picture posted on social media. Heckles, whistles, the clicking of phone cameras, and gleeful laughter merged into a massive torrent of sound. It surged with the melody of Happy Breakup into that small private room, ruthlessly scouring every inch of space, threatening to drown and tear apart everyone inside. Victoria's screams were long lost in the overwhelming wave of noise. She huddled in a corner of the sofa, shaking like a leaf, her hands clamped over her face. Muffled, desperate sobs escaped through her fingers. She was as pathetic as a broken doll tossed in the mud. Ethan finally snapped out of his thunderstruck stupor. The immense humiliation felt like 1,000 red-hot needles stabbing into every nerve. He jolted awake, his pale face instantly turning a deep liver red. Veins bulged on his forehead and neck. He raised a hand so violently he almost knocked his own glasses off, trying with all his might to slam the damn door shut. Close it, close the goddamn door, he roared, his voice distorted by pure rage and terror. But the two waiters who had kicked the door in stood like statues at the entrance, their faces blank. One of them, a burly man, deliberately leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, making Ethan's frantic shoves completely useless. The door didn't budge an inch. The waiter's eyes were cold, tinged with an almost imperceptible disdain. Get out of the way, do you hear me? Ethan was completely unhinged, his bloodshot eyes glaring at the waiters like a gambler who had lost everything. He reached out to shove them. Sir, please calm down, the bouncer-like waiter finally spoke, his voice flat but carrying an unshakable authority. He took a small step forward, his powerful body forming an invisible wall that forced Ethan back. Ethan was trembling with rage at the man's attitude but didn't dare to actually attack him. Just then, a series of sharp clicks echoed through the hall. Blinding flashes from phone cameras lit up like lightning from every corner of the lobby, mercilessly illuminating Ethan's shame-twisted face. The onlookers, holding up their phones, were ruthlessly documenting the banker's most disgraceful moment. Ethan let out a broken howl. He threw his arm up to shield his face and recoiled as if electrocuted, stumbling backward into the coffee table. The expensive suit was instantly smeared with sticky cream and fruit jam from the platter, a complete mess. He was like a monkey, stripped bare and thrown into a public square, desperately trying to dodge the ubiquitous cameras. He finally scrambled into a corner of the sofa next to Victoria, burying his face in his hands, shaking even more violently than she was. The dignity of the banking elite was ground into dust. The other 3 women in the room finally had their own meltdowns. "Stop taking pictures, please. Stop, Vivian," the woman in red finally reacted, screaming through her tears. She tried to pull the heavy curtains, but they were decorative and fixed in place. Frantic, she tried to grab the microphone Daisy had dropped, intending to smash the cameras, but Daisy shoved her away. Daisy was in a daze. Staring at the dark crowd and the flashing lights, her eyes were unfocused. "It's over," she mumbled to herself. "It's all over." Her perfectly coiffed hair was a mess, and the watermelon juice stains on her sequin dress looked like ugly patches. Chloe, the short-haired one, had the most direct reaction. She screamed, dropped to the floor, and curled up into a ball behind the sofa, only the top of her trembling head visible. The watermelon slice was long gone. The private room had become an island of despair, besieged and observed. The sounds of breakdown crying, angry roars, and helpless pleas mingled with the thunderous chorus of happy breakup and the jeering whistles from outside, creating a grotesque and cruel symphony. And I stood at the center of it all, feeling the gazes from every direction, some sympathetic, some admiring, but most of them just thrilled to have witnessed such a spectacular show. That destructive sense of satisfaction, like the strongest liquor, coursed through my veins. This public execution had only just begun. I stood in the eye of the storm, my gaze locked on the pathetic pair in the private room. Barry was still pumping his fist, cursing a blue streak. Archie chugged another beer, his eyes gleaming. Lawrence held his phone steady, the screen's cold light reflecting on his impassive face as his camera captured every detail, especially Ethan's twisted, flash-bleached face. The crowd's laughter and camera clicks grew louder. Someone started clapping in rhythm with the music, chanting, "Happy breakup, happy breakup." Each chant was like an invisible slap across the faces of the 2 in the room. Just then, a man in a Hawaiian shirt with slicked-back hair, probably some low-level floor manager, pushed through the crowd with several tough-looking men in security uniforms. He was sweating, trying to get to the private room. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled at the 2 waiters guarding the door. "Close the door, cut the feed. Have you all gone insane?" His goons started to move forward, but the 2 waiters didn't budge, merely glancing instinctively toward our booth. Lawrence didn't even look up. His fingers flew across his phone screen. Almost instantly, the crisp ding of a message notification sounded from the Hawaiian-shirted manager's pocket. It was barely audible over the din, but it acted like a kill switch. He froze, fumbling for his phone. He only needed one look at the screen. The frantic urgency on his face solidified, replaced by an expression of utter disbelief and terror. He snapped his head up, his gaze shooting over the crowd directly to our booth, specifically to the nonchalant Lawrence. Lawrence simply gave a slight nod, his expression calm. The manager's face twitched violently, his eyes filled with a struggling, fearful respect. He stared at his phone, then back at Lawrence, then at the wretched couple in the room and the out-of-control situation. After a few agonizing seconds, he seemed to deflate completely. His shoulders slumped. He gave a reluctant nod at his phone, and then waved his hand dismissively, signaling his goons to back down. He wasn't touching this. The goons looked at each other, confused, but obeyed, retreating into the shadows. The manager, Rico, lowered his head like a defeated rooster and slunk away, not daring to look at the room again. This silent power play didn't go unnoticed by the sharper members of the audience. The raucous jeering was now peppered with whispers of awe and speculation. "Whoa, did you see that? The manager just backed down. Damn, who are those guys in the booth?" He shut that manager down with one look. "Seriously, don't mess with them. That Ethan guy really picked the wrong person to screw over. Serves him right for messing with another man's wife." These whispers, like tiny poison darts, found their way into Ethan's ears. Through the gaps in his fingers, his bloodshot eyes saw the manager retreat, then snap toward our booth, fixating on Lawrence's emotionless face. The fear and humiliation in his eyes were instantly replaced by a deeper despair and a venomous hatred. He began to shake even more violently. Suddenly, Ethan let out an animalistic roar. He shot up from the sofa like a rabid bull, his eyes red, and charged mindlessly toward the door. He had to escape this hell. He had to tear apart those gawking, camera-wielding vultures. "Stop him," Barry yelled, grabbing an empty beer bottle to charge forward. But the waiters at the door were faster. The burly one's eyes narrowed. Just as Ethan got within a few feet, he pivoted, and his right leg shot out in a flash. Thump. A clean, efficient leg sweep. Ethan's forward momentum was completely broken. Inertia sent him flying, and he landed face first on the marble floor with a sickening thud. The sound made teeth ache. Ethan lay motionless. A few seconds later, he twitched like a dying fish. Blood gushed from his nose, staining the expensive marble. His perfectly styled hair was ruined, matted with dust. His glasses had flown off, one lens shattered, the frame bent, lying forlornly a few feet away. He tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled too violently. After a moment of stunned silence, someone let out a choked laugh. It was like lighting a fuse. The entire lobby exploded in a tsunami of hysterical laughter, filled with naked mockery, contempt, and the sheer joy of watching a clown show. He face-planted, so this is the banking elite. Damn, that was a perfect 10. Get a picture of his new look. The flashes intensified, zeroing in on the pool of blood, and the pathetic figure struggling on the floor. The sudden violence shocked Victoria out of her tears. She stared blankly at Ethan's crumpled form, her eyes empty, as if the last pillar of her support had been kicked out from under her. I watched it all coldly. Ethan's miserable state didn't evoke a shred of pity in me, only the cold confirmation that he was finished. His respectability, his dignity, his future, the moment he hit that floor, they were shattered along with his glasses, ground into the dirt. This public execution was exceeding all my expectations. The deafening laughter continued to echo through the lobby, like countless rough hands grinding away the last vestiges of dignity from the couple in the room. Ethan lay on the cold marble floor like a spineless dog, his nosebleed spreading into a glaring red stain. After a few futile struggles, he gave up, burying his face in his arms. His body was racked with violent tremors of humiliation, and he let out the muffled bestial whimpers of a broken animal. Victoria was slumped on the sofa, her gaze vacant as she stared at the figure on the floor, her soul seemingly ripped from her body, leaving only an empty shell. The relentless, cruelly cheerful melody of Happy Breakup played on. Just then Daisy, the blonde in the sequined dress who had been screaming in the room, seemed to crack under the immense pressure. She scrambled out from behind the sofa, tears still streaking her face, but her eyes held a wild, desperate look. She ran to the doorway, ignoring the prone Ethan, and shrieked at the dark crowd outside. "It wasn't our fault. It had nothing to do with us. It was Victoria. She's the one who insisted on bringing Ethan. She said her husband was a useless coward who didn't understand her. She and Ethan have been together for a long time. They even said tonight they were going to." Her words were partially drowned out by the music and laughter, but the key phrases came through loud and clear. "You bitch, shut your mouth," Victoria, as if stabbed by a poison needle, snapped out of her stupor. She let out a piercing, broken shriek and lunged toward the door, trying to cover Daisy's mouth. But her legs were weak, her heel twisted, and she too collapsed onto the floor, landing just a foot away from Ethan. Equally pathetic. Daisy flinched, but now that the words were out, she decided to go all in. She pointed a trembling finger at the heap that was Victoria. It was her. She initiated everything. "Ethan," he was just confused for a moment. "Please stop taking pictures." "Stop," she cried, waving her arms uselessly, trying to block the sea of phone cameras. This pathetic blame shifting and backstabbing was like pouring gasoline on a fire. "Wow, fake friends at their finest. Did you hear that?" She called her own husband a useless coward, confused for a moment. They were practically eating each other's faces off. Who's she kidding? Get it all on camera. Let everyone see this filthy couple and their backstabbing friend. The torrent of insults, curses, and camera clicks grew even more ferocious. Flashes mercilessly illuminated Victoria's ashen, soulless face, Daisy's hysterical expression, and the back of Ethan's head, stained with blood and dust. Barry slapped his thigh. Dog eat dog, this is brilliant, fucking brilliant. Archie was grinning, cracking open another beer. Lawrence still held his phone, the lens panning steadily from the motionless Ethan to the broken Victoria to the traitorous Daisy, finally settling on the two other ashen-faced women cowering behind the sofa. His fingers tapped the screen, clearly saving and sending something. I watched the farce unfold. Victoria's words, useless coward, pricked my ears like an icicle but no longer stirred any emotion. The sight of traitors tearing each other apart only made the conclusion of this execution dirtier and therefore more perfect. The time was right. I picked up the heavy microphone again. The massive shriek of feedback once again silenced the chaos. The laughter and chatter died down as all eyes snapped back to me, filled with eager anticipation. I ignored them, my cold gaze locking onto the crumpled figure at the doorway. Ethan must have sensed my malevolent stare, because his body tensed violently, and he tried to bury his head even deeper. Ethan Montgomery, my voice, amplified and utterly devoid of warmth, carried to every corner of the room. Look at me. The figure on the floor froze. I said, look at me, I repeated, my tone heavier, each word a spike of ice hammering down under the weight of hundreds of stares and countless phone lenses. Painfully, slowly, Ethan lifted his heavy head. His face was a wreck. His nose was swollen, caked with half-dried blood and dust. His forehead was scraped raw from the fall. Without his glasses, his eyes were exposed, bloodshot. Pupils constricted in terror and shame, his gaze unfocused and lost, like a dying animal caught in a spotlight. The carefully crafted image of the banking elite was now nothing but a filthy, shattered ruin. The camera flashes went into a frenzy, documenting this historic moment. I looked at him, a humorless smile twisting my lips. My cold words carried through the microphone, delivered to his ears and to everyone else in the room. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, be at the bank entrance. Make sure you're wearing your pathetic suit. Your director will be there to greet you personally. My words were like a ladle of ice water thrown into a vat of boiling oil. The crowd erupted. The director? Holy shit, he's not done a public execution. Part 2 at the bank tomorrow, quick, record this, post it. I'm so going to be there tomorrow that Ethan guy is screwed. He's going to lose his job for sure. Forget his job after this video gets out. He's finished and the entire financial industry serves him right. Payback's a bitch. The crowd was in a frenzy. The roar of excitement and schadenfreude threatened to tear the roof off. Ethan's eyes widened to their absolute limit. The last spark of light in his pupils flickered and died. He stared at me, his lips trembling violently, a gasping, wheezing sound escaping his throat. He couldn't form a single word. The expression on his face was 1,000,000 times more hopeless than when he'd hit the floor. The bank that was his last fortress, the source of his status and respectability. And I had just announced to the world that I was about to tear it down. A strangled, inhuman sound escaped his throat. His body convulsed, his head lolled to the side, and he passed out cold. Ethan Victoria let out a heart-wrenching scream and scrambled over to him, uselessly shaking his limp body. I watched, my face a mask, my heart a frozen desert. Fainting? This is only the beginning. Let's go, I said, putting down the microphone. My voice was quiet, but my 3 friends heard me clearly. Barry smacked his lips, still wanting more. We're leaving now? The show's just getting good. Archie looked reluctantly at the chaotic scene. Lawrence had already pocketed his phone. The climax is tomorrow, he said calmly. I turned and walked away. The crowd parted from me automatically. As I passed, their looks were filled with awe, curiosity, and a faint, new trace of fear. The 4 of us, like knights who had just slain a dragon, walked out of that roaring den of judgment with an aura of cold fury, never looking back. Behind us, we left Victoria's desperate, shattered sobs, the excited chatter of the onlookers, the lingering flashes of cameras, and the final, still cheerful, piercing notes of happy breakup. The night air, cool with the first hint of autumn, stung my hot face, bringing a sharp clarity. We got into the car and shut the doors. sealing out the last vestiges of that mad world. The silence inside was broken only by the low hum of the AC. Barry, in the passenger seat, was rubbing his hands together, the excitement still glowing on his face. "You're really going to the bank? You think that director will actually listen to us?" he asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. I didn't answer. I pulled out my phone, its light illuminating the dark car. I opened an encrypted folder. Inside were several documents. I swiped and opened one, a series of crystal-clear scans of a property contract, bank statements, and several damningly intimate photo screenshots. The recipient's email address was clearly visible, the official address for the internal disciplinary department of a major commercial bank in the city. The timestamp showed it was sent just before we left the karaoke bar. I turned the screen toward Barry. He leaned in, squinting. After a few seconds, his eyes grew wider and wider. He sucked in a sharp breath and slapped his thigh. "Holy shit, Sincere, you're a fucking genius. How did you get this? This son of a bitch was using client down payments to speculate on real estate. And with a female client, no less, this evidence is airtight. You're a legend." He was flushed with excitement. Archie and Lawrence leaned over to look. Archie let out a low whistle. Lawrence just nodded faintly, as if this was all part of the plan. "The director," I said, turning off the screen and plunging the car back into darkness, "is going to have a lot of messes to clean up tomorrow." I leaned back and closed my eyes, my voice filled with the exhaustion of taking out the trash, yet still bone-chillingly cold. The car started, merging smoothly into the city's river of traffic. The neon lights outside blurred past, a surreal, never-ending drama. The chaos of the karaoke bar was far behind us, but I knew another stage was already set, waiting for its star to arrive. The next morning, 8:50 a.m., downtown, outside the imposing glass facade of the bank building, which gleamed in the morning sun. It was the peak of rush hour. Well-dressed employees hurried past, swiping their cards to enter the revolving doors. On the sidewalk, several people who appeared to be waiting for cars or friends kept glancing not so subtly toward the bank entrance, their eyes alight with barely suppressed excitement. Barry, Archie, Lawrence, and I sat in a coffee shop directly across the street by the large plate glass window. Steaming cups of coffee sat untouched on the table. Our gazes were like four cold spears, piercing through the glass and locking onto the bank's massive entrance. At 8:58 a.m., a black Audi A6L pulled up smoothly to the curb. The driver quickly got out and jogged around to open the back door. A slightly overweight, middle-aged man in an expensive dark gray suit stepped out. His hair was impeccably styled, but his face was thunderous, so dark it looked like it might rain. He was Arthur Anderson, the director of this branch. Instead of going straight in as usual, he stood at the entrance as if waiting for someone, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. A grim-faced assistant stood behind him, clutching a tablet. The pedestrians waiting by the road instantly came to life. They subtly adjusted their positions, their phone cameras already aimed. The atmosphere grew taut. At 8:59 a.m., a taxi screeched to a halt at the corner. The door opened, and a man in a wrinkled suit, his hair a mess with several conspicuous bandages on his face, stumbled out. It was Ethan Montgomery. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, his complexion a deathly gray. The suit that once symbolized his status was now as rumpled as a dish rag. He kept his head down, his steps unsteady like a soulless zombie walking on hot coals. He didn't dare look up, his eyes fixed on the small patch of ground in front of his feet. The onlookers held their breath. Every eye was on him. Phone cameras zoomed in silently. Ethan shuffled his way to the bank entrance and saw the stone-faced Director Anderson waiting for him. His body went rigid. He froze, instinctively wanting to turn and run, but his body wouldn't obey. Sheer terror seized him, choking the air from his lungs. Director Anderson saw him. His grim face darkened further at the sight of Ethan's pathetic state. The fury in his eyes was about to erupt, but it was overshadowed by the immense humiliation of this public spectacle. He took a deep breath, visibly trying to contain a volcano. The clock struck 9 a.m. Director Anderson didn't move. He didn't enter the bank. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, in full view of everyone, under the silent focus of countless phone cameras, his gaze like two red-hot pokers burning into Ethan. It was a look of utter disappointment, cold fury, and undisguised, public disgust, as if Ethan weren't his once capable subordinate, but a piece of stinking garbage that needed to be disposed of immediately. This silent, public shaming from his ultimate superior was 100 times more brutal than any verbal lashing. Ethan began to tremble violently. He couldn't bear the weight of that gaze. His legs gave out, his knees buckled, and as if all his bones had been removed, he collapsed, kneeling on the cold, hard marble steps of the bank. Thump. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking, and let out a muffled, desperate sob. He was a broken dog, his spine snapped, completely shattered at the threshold of the bank, under the watch of his director and the lenses of 100 cameras. Click, 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 the sound of camera shutters, no longer suppressed, exploded like popping corn. Flashes went off in a continuous wave. The onlookers dropped all pretense and rushed forward, phones held high, madly filming the kneeling, broken Ethan and the stone-faced, ice-eyed director Anderson. "Oh my God, he's kneeling, did you get that? Quick, send it to the group." That look on Director Anderson's face, it's murder. Ethan Montgomery is socially dead. His career is over. Forget his career. Once this video is out, he'll be a pariah in the entire financial world. The chatter swelled into a tidal wave. Director Anderson looked at the inhuman wreck kneeling before him, a muscle in his jaw twitching. The last trace of pity in his eyes was replaced by ice. He didn't spare Ethan another glance, as if the sight of him was too foul. He spun around and barked at his assistant. "Notify HR. Begin termination procedures immediately. And tell security to get this thing out of here. I don't want it dirtying the bank's entrance." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to those nearby. Without another word, Director Anderson walked briskly through the revolving doors and disappeared. The assistant immediately began speaking urgently into a walkie-talkie. 2 security guards quickly emerged. They didn't even look at the sobbing figure on the ground. One on each side, they roughly grabbed Ethan's limp arms and dragged him up like a sack of trash from the cold marble steps. Ethan offered no resistance, a limp doll with his head hanging low, his feet dragging on the ground. The guards hauled him, under the scrutiny of countless cameras and contemptuous stares, to a generic internal service vehicle parked at the curb. The door was pulled open, and Ethan was unceremoniously shoved into the back seat. The car sped off and disappeared around the corner, leaving behind nothing but an invisible stain on the bank's reputation and a crowd of people excitedly sharing their videos. In the coffee shop, Barry chugged his now cold coffee. "That son of a bitch is toast, completely and utterly finished. Let's see him act so high and mighty now." Archie was laughing as he scrolled through his phone. "The video's gone viral. It's all over my group chats. Banking elite kneels in public, dragged away by security. What a headline." Lawrence calmly set down his cup and looked at me. "What about Victoria?" I picked up my phone. The screen showed a recently rejected call from Victoria and over a dozen unread messages. I opened them. It was all from her. "Sincere, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please forgive me this one time. It was all Ethan. He seduced me. He forced me. I saw the videos. I know you're angry. Can we just go home? I'll do anything you say. Please just answer the phone. Let's talk about this. For the sake of all our years together, do you really have to be so cruel? Do you have to destroy me? Say something. What the hell do you want?" The last few messages had shifted from begging to hysterical sobs and accusations. I stared at them, feeling nothing. Betrayal is a poisoned knife. Once it's in, the wound never heals, it just rots. I calmly closed the messages and found the number for Mr. Peterson in my contacts. I dialed. "Mr. Peterson, it's me." My voice was steady. "Is everything ready?" "Mr. Clark." His professional voice came through the line. "Everything is in order. The divorce agreement, the asset division details with special notation of the preliminary evidence you provided regarding potential asset transfers by your wife, the lawsuit filing based on gross misconduct, and the special notice you requested. They are ready for delivery at any time. Good." I looked up, my gaze passing through the cafe window, as if seeing the world that was about to be completely destroyed. "You have the address. Serve them now, understood. They will be delivered immediately." I hung up. The sun outside was bright, reflecting dazzlingly off the bank's glass facade. The streets were bustling, the world kept spinning, but I knew that for some people their world had already collapsed last night, with no possibility of ever being rebuilt. The car stopped in front of the apartment building I once called home. I stepped out, my feet landing with a dull thud on the pavement. Barry, Archie, and Lawrence followed behind me like a silent wall. The key turning in the lock was unnaturally loud in the quiet hallway. The living room was a disaster. Cushions were on the floor. The coffee table was littered with empty liquor bottles and crumpled tissues. Victoria was huddled on the sofa, looking like a drowned bird. She was still wearing last night's stained cream-colored lace dress. Her hair was greasy and matted to her face, her eyes sunken and swollen. At the sound of the door, she looked up. When she saw me, her empty eyes flared with a desperate, last-ditch glimmer of hope. "Sincere," she croaked, trying to stand but collapsing back onto the sofa. "You're finally back. I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Can we start over?" she babbled, fresh tears streaming down her filthy cheeks. I didn't look at her. My eyes fell on a thick manila envelope lying on the glass coffee table, sealed with the prominent red stamp of a law firm. Next to it was a plain white envelope with no markings. Mr. Peterson was efficient. I walked over, picked up the heavy manila envelope, and without a glance, flicked my wrist. It landed with a soft thud on the sofa in front of her. Victoria flinched at the sound, her terrified eyes fixed on the red seal. What is this?" she stammered, a terrible premonition in her voice. "Sign it," I said, my voice flat. "You have 3 days to get your things and get out." The last bit of color drained from Victoria's face. She stared at me in disbelief, her lips trembling. "Divorce? You want to divorce me? For one mistake? Sincere, we've been married for years. How can you be so heartless?" She lunged at me, trying to grab my arm. I sidestepped easily, and her tear and filth-stained hand grazed my sleeve before she fell, sprawling onto the rug. "One mistake?" I looked down at her, my eyes like chips of ice. "When you were busy sucking face with another man. Did you think about our marriage then? When you were calling your husband a useless coward, Where was your heart then?" My voice was low, but every word was a knife. Victoria's body shuddered. She looked up, the last trace of pleading in her eyes replaced by venom. "It's your fault," she shrieked. "All you ever cared about was your stupid job. Did you ever care about me? What did you ever give me?" "Ethan, at least he paid attention to me. He bought me bags. What do you have besides your pathetic salary? You useless coward. You ruined me. You ruined everything," she screamed, a hysterical madwoman. Behind me, Barry frowned. Archie spat on the floor. Lawrence remained impassive. I looked at her ugly, hysterical face, and the last flicker of any emotion I had for her evaporated. I bent down and picked up the plain white envelope from the coffee table. "You should look at this too." I tossed it on the floor in front of her like a dirty rag. Victoria's venomous tirade stopped abruptly. She stared at the envelope with a flicker of fear, then snatched it up with a trembling hand. She tore it open and pulled out a few sheets of paper. She only needed one look. Her entire body went rigid, her eyes locked on the pages, her pupils dilating in sheer terror and shock. No, this is impossible," she shrieked, her voice sharp enough to pierce eardrums, filled with apocalyptic despair. "It's fake. You forged this. You're framing me." She waved the papers around, completely unhinged. The papers were photocopies of bank records and transfer receipts. They clearly showed that over the last 6 months, multiple large sums of money had been moved from our joint account, and from a secret personal account of hers, into Ethan Montgomery's private account. The transaction notes were clearly labeled loan for property purchase, investment capital, and so on. The timeline and amounts corresponded disturbingly well with the money Ethan had embezzled from his client. While not direct proof of her involvement in the embezzlement, it was a clear, terrifying trail of breadcrumbs that would be more than enough for the bank and the police to start an investigation. If Ethan cracked under pressure, the consequences for her would be unthinkable. Forged. I looked at her collapsing, twisted face, a cold sneer on my lips. "You can take them to the police. Report me. Or," I paused, my voice a poison-tipped icicle, "you can wait for the Financial Crimes Unit to come knocking on your door with them." The papers slipped from Victoria's hand and scattered on the floor. It was as if her spine had been ripped out. She collapsed onto the rug, shaking like a leaf, her eyes vacant, filled with nothing but boundless terror and despair. All the venom and accusations were gone, replaced by the dying whimpers of a trapped animal. "Sign the papers and give them to Mr. Peterson. In 3 days, I don't want to see you or any of your things in this apartment ever again." I gave her one last look, the kind of look you give a speck of dirt you've just wiped from your life. Then I turned and walked away without a shred of hesitation. Sincere, you can't do this. You can't do this to me. I was wrong. I really was. Please, give me another chance. Behind me, I heard Victoria's heart-wrenching, incoherent screams and pleas, accompanied by the sound of her crawling uselessly across the rug. I didn't look back. Barry, Archie, and Lawrence followed me out. The heavy security door clicked shut behind us, sealing off her disgusting sobs and the suffocating stench of despair. In the hallway, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I took a deep breath of the air that was finally free of her scent. It felt clean, cool in my lungs. From behind the door came the muffled thud of something being thrown against it, followed by the sound of Victoria's complete, utter, and final breakdown into soul-shattering wails.